Hi, welcome back to the Happier Life Project, your go-to podcast for all things mental health, wellness, and personal development. I'm your host, Gabby Sanderson, and today we're diving into a topic that resonates with many of us, but one that still has room for more to discover, and that's writing as therapy. How can putting pen to paper help us to process our emotions, confront challenges, and heal? Well, let's find out. Joining me today is somebody who's not only an incredible storyteller, but also a fierce advocate for mental health. Michelle Thomas is the best-selling author of My Shit Therapist and Other Mental Health Stories, a book that has touched countless readers by shining a light on her own struggles with mental illness and bad therapy experiences, as well as those of others. Michelle's raw, honest, and at times hilariously poignant narrative has helped so many of us feel seen. In last week's episode, you got to meet Michelle and learn about her journey from being a high-flying booker to really struggling with her mental health, to the point where she could no longer continue in that role. Michelle soon enough realised that deep down it wasn't the path she was meant to be on, and then had to navigate rebuilding her life, trading the glitz of celebrities, fancy cheese, and the BBC, to working in her local coffee shop, serving soup, sandwiches, and coffee, and how for Michelle that actually turned out to be far more rewarding. We also explored how Michelle's experiences inspired My Shit Therapist, which topped the Audible charts. And we discussed the healing powers of small acts of self-care, like visiting your local coffee shop or feeding baby farm animals. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, you'll find it just before this one, or type into the search bar Sip Talk Read Feed with Michelle Thomas and it should pop up. In this episode of the Happier Life Project podcast, we're going to dive deeper into what drove Michelle to write about mental health and why she's so passionate about incorporating and sharing other people's mental health stories into her work. We'll also explore Michelle's personal journey with therapy, the good, the bad, and everything in between. Why is it so difficult to find a good therapist? And what can we learn from those frustrating experiences? Plus, we're going to touch on Prince Harry's recent suggestion to rename mental health to mental fitness. Is it all just semantics, or could it be a real game changer? And finally, for anybody who thinks they aren't a writer, Michelle has some powerful thoughts on why writing can be a healing tool for everyone, whether or not you consider yourself an author. So, grab your notebook or just settle in for some inspiration. Ready to find a healthier, happier you? Let's get started. So, was the dream always to be a writer?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a writer. As a kid, I would read, going back to, not having any friends and not really knowing how to talk to people my own age, I read a lot, which put me in really good stead. And I loved writing, and I was really good at English. And I actually I studied theatre. I thought I wanted to be a performer, which was really fun. But then actually coming out of uni, to make theatre, really you have to be around other people. And I couldn't quite find my way into, I didn't quite find my tribe in that way of kind of meeting people to collaborate with and be creative with. But to be a writer, you can do that on your own. So that's sort of how I had the realization one day of acting sort of relies on other people. I'm going to be a writer because I can just do that on my own in my room. And the first writing project that I did was called I Will Pay £1 for Your Story. I didn't have any money. I had and I thought, okay, I could spend a tenner on a yoga class to make myself feel better,
Yeah.
or I could spend £2 on a marker and a piece of A3 cardboard, and I can write, I will pay £1 for your story, and I can buy 8 stories and see what happens there. So that's what I did. I made this sign and I took it to Greenwich Park. And the first story I heard was an elderly lady telling me how she was stalked by a panther in the Himalayas and describing, and she was a wheelchair user, an elderly lady, and suddenly she was back there and describing the smell of the frangipani trees and the fig trees and the colours and creating this really beautiful, vivid picture, but with this level of threat of I had to walk so quietly and so slowly because I was being stalked by a panther. Um, and I thought, okay, I might be onto something here. So then I just blogged. I just did that for a while and that was a really cool creative outlet. And I worked in a cafe and did that. And that was really fulfilling and really fun.
Mm.
And that was something that really helped me recover and helped me get the confidence to go, all right, I am a writer actually, and I can do this. And then I tried to crowdfund the book, a book that, it didn't happen, but that's fine. But what I did get out of that was my first byline in The Independent. And then it all just sort of grew from there.
Oh, wow. So from there, when did you decide I've got a book in me writing about my own mental health journey?
So in 2015, I wrote a blog about being body shamed, which
I was going to ask you about this as well.
Flew around the world.
Yeah.
It was incredible. So I was working on this book of £1 stories, and I went on a date and I got this really shitty 400-word text message about my body from this guy. And I just thought, how fucking dare you? And I was just so angry. And then I wrote a blog about it,
because
uploaded it.
Brad Pitt, of course.
Of course, yeah. And then I was really angry. And what do writers do when they're angry? They write. So I wrote this blog, posted it, didn't think anything else of it, went on another date, came home, and it had been viewed 3,000 times. And to this day, I've got no idea how it happened. I'm not in any way a marketing genius, but it flew around the world. And off the back of that, I got an agent. And the plan was to write a book about body image. But the publisher came back and asked, oh, actually, we're looking at the mental health space. Is there anything, because you've written a little bit about this before, maybe that's something that you can think about and write something for. So yes, so that's what we did. It took ages. And it was kind of stops and starts because I thought, do I have to be, I'm not an expert. And I was really in the way that I think a lot of creators are at the moment. And I think it is to the detriment of a lot of creative work. I didn't know how to have a nuanced conversation about intersectional issues when it comes to mental health without just simply listing, these are all the things I am not. I am not a person of color. I am not LGBT. I am very privileged in these ways, A, B, C. Mm-hmm. And while I think that that's really important, it's really important to acknowledge your privileges. Of course it is. My mental health, I had a very different experience of poor mental health than a marginalized person would, or a further marginalized person would. But I do think that it's to the detriment of some creators and their work. I think we're constantly thinking about what's the most bad faith argument that the voice on Twitter could make about what I'm writing here.
Right.
So it took me a really long time to get over that. A lot of the writing was rewriting, which is the case, but I think also in my case, a lot of the writing was second guessing and going, is it okay for me to say that? Is that what I really mean? And okay, if the person who's going to go, oh, but what about blah, 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 blah? And why haven't you thought of blah, 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 blah? And it's really terrible and awful and a reflection of you as a person that you haven't done blah, 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 or that you did do blah, 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 blah.
It sounds
And
more
what,
like your inner critic going a bit
oh,
nuts.
it's absolutely my inner critic going nuts as well.
Yeah,
But I do also think that
there's a lot of
um,
trolls.
there are a lot of trolls. I think what social media has done, and particularly Twitter, I will never call it X. It will always be Twitter.
Yeah, me neither. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what Twitter has done is give the person with the worst possible faith arguments equal weight, in their words, to a reviewer being sort of clear-eyed and consistent about things. So yeah, my own inner critic and your own sort of imposter syndrome-y stuff, and that's one thing. But when to feel like I never wanted to feel like I was presenting myself as the example of poor mental health. I didn't want to frame myself as a poster child for poor mental health because I was so aware of my privilege. And because of that, the framework of the book came about where I don't just want to tell my story as a straight, white, seemingly middle class woman. I want to include stories from people whose lives have been impacted at every level by poor mental health. It can affect where you live. It can affect how you eat. It can affect, whether or not you can go to the supermarket and face the bright lights. It can you parent, which isn't something that I've got experience of. So I knew that I wanted to be quite a broad book that explores how mental health can impact every area of your life, including areas that I don't have any experience in.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I thought it was lovely that you include other people's stories at the end of each chapter. And also, I thought what was really cool, and then certainly, I mean, I've spoken about my mental health challenges on the podcast. It kind of helps you feel as the reader, it's all very normal. I really like Owen O'Kane, who we've had on the podcast a couple of times. He's an incredible psychotherapist and author, but he's kind of come to the conclusion now that it's just being a human. We've all got our mental health stuff. And he says it's just humaning, or however he put it. And that's very much what I think comes across in this book, like how navigating relationships is challenging at the best of times, whether you're struggling with your mental health or not. Body issues, another, moving house. Oh my God, what was it? 12 times or 14 times in 12 years?
14 times in 12 years, yeah.
Yeah. So it was all the things that like are challenging to, let's not say every person on the planet, but the majority of people on the planet. If you do struggle with your mental health, then it just makes everything harder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice. It just felt like you were sharing your story and other people's stories, but also I think very much making the reader feel like, oh, it happens to them too,
Yeah. That's a kind of conversation about mental health that I feel confident that I can contribute to. But I also think it's really important to include voices that go beyond that human experience. So, for example, in the book, there's a bit where I talk about going for an assessment, for a mental health assessment. And then it's just, have you thought about death in the last 2 weeks? No. Have you thought about suicide? No. Have you thought about harming anyone else? And I said, no. And I wrote about how that felt like a really personal attack. Like I'd never hurt my partner and I've never had thoughts about harming anyone else. And I felt really hurt by that. And I got the most beautiful email from a woman saying, just so you know, I had postpartum psychosis and I had those thoughts. I had thoughts about killing my child and killing my partner, and then killing myself. I fantasized about it. And to hear me like kind of writing that off as the worst thing a human being could think about, that's confirming everything, every bad thought I ever had about myself that stopped me from getting help. And it was such a fantastic email. She was so well within her right to call me out publicly or, write a post about it or go, this is clearly a woman who isn't prepared for the nuances of this conversation. But she emailed me and I emailed her back and I ended up interviewing her and I was able to include her experience as an epilogue in the digital version of the book. That's something that I was really pleased that I was able to sort of retrospectively correct because we can talk about humaning and we can talk about how, of course, moving house, it's the stresses that exist in modern life are all things that are going to impact our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But some people have more severe mental health issues. Some people see and hear things that aren't there. Some people have, compulsively eats cutlery, which is a woman I've just started following on Instagram. She's in a psych ward. So I do think there has to be some nuance between saying, oh, everyone's got mental health. And yes, but some people need additional support because their mental health experience is profoundly, profoundly different from the average.
Very, very valid point. I'd love to know, and sorry, this has just popped into my head, but it was recently in the press about Prince Harry saying, don't know if you caught it.
What did we say?
He thinks that we should stop using the words mental health and we should instead say mental fitness because he thinks that sounds more positive, gives a more positive connotation when we're talking about our well-being. And I raised an eyebrow there because I thought in context, I'm not sure if that would work, quite frankly.
I mean, how I'm feeling mentally unfit at the moment. The thing is about fitness is that the onus is very much on the person. So if you're not fit, that's kind of your fault. That's your responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I think because my mind is just going straight to diet culture. My mind is just going straight to eat less, move more, go to the gym to lose weight, not because exercise is nice, not because there are any other benefits of being exercised, but go to the gym to make your body smaller because that's what you owe the world.
Yeah, fitness to me means movement. I suppose it is diet too, but yeah.
I mean, I think the implication is that and it is true that there are exercises and that there are tangible things that you can do to improve your mental fitness. But then that, again, I feel like that excludes those people whose experience of mental poor health goes beyond, working a job that doesn't suit them.
Yeah.
Or, being in housing that isn't suitable for them. And so what's for those people, are they just permanently mentally unfit? It feels like more of a judgment.
Yeah, very good point. Well, as well, if you're going through a bad time, for me, just that there's too much that I associate with the word fitness that I don't associate with mental health, even though I do understand kind of where he's going.
Yeah. I mean, I like Harry. I do. I'm not a royalist, but I think he seems like a good egg. But no, for me, I think it puts too much onus on the individual and not on. I think the implication, if you're mentally unfit, is that you're not doing enough mental sit-ups, not that we're living in a system where, the NHS was decimated over the last 14 years. That's not your mental unfitness that's caused that.
Exactly.
I think it puts too much onus on the individual, and it's very convenient because then there's the corporations that have you working 8 till 8 or working in the city. It's like I wrote in the book, there are places in Canary Wharf where, there are pods where you can sleep. There are places where you can do your laundry. There are places where you can get therapy. And, that seems really nice, but it's not. It's designed to make you more productive and keep you at work. So I think it's framing it as mental fitness is framing it as a commodity that it is up to the individual to maintain, I think.
Yeah, good point. I know I just kind of deviated there, didn't I?
No, I love it.
I'm going to ask you one question quickly about therapy because obviously it's the name of the book, and then I'm going to get some more writing stuff.
Yeah.
I think anybody that's been to therapy has encountered at least one shit therapist. Maybe that's shit for them. They might be great for somebody else.
Yeah.
But I'm dying to know how that became the title of the book. And obviously, there's quite a funny about a response, wasn't it? To was it a panic attack?
Yeah. So after I'd been unwell, I went to a GP and I got, I went to the first time you go to a GP and go, I think I'm a mad person now, is horrible and really, really hard.
Yeah.
So I went to a GP, I was prescribed antidepressants, and I was given a contact for a counselling service. And I thought, okay, this has come from the doctor. This has come from my GP. I have to go and talk to someone because I'm not well in the head. So this is going to be, not this better be good, but this is bound to be good. This person is going to be the expert. This person is the NHS affiliated, recommended, be all and end all. And I think the way that mental health support is structured in this country, where it's so difficult to access, that when you do access, the weight of expectation is so heavy. So I went to see this woman and I described having a panic attack, and I described the physical symptoms, and I had a panic attack in St. Pancras, and I told her things that I'd never told anyone. And, it's your first time in a room like this. You're intensely vulnerable and frightened. And her response was, well, the next time you think you're going to have a panic attack, just make yourself a cup of tea and think about something else.
Sorry, I'm laughing. There's nothing funny about that.
Of course there is. Because, there are people who are far worse off than you. That was the kicker.
Wow.
20 quid that cost me. 20 quid that cost me. So that was devastating. After all that build up, after being ill for so long, taking so long to get help, and then waiting for the help to come. And that's the cavalry. Yeah. That's the cavalry. The cavalry is just going to tell me to have a cup of tea and think about something else. So I didn't go and see her again. I did go and see another therapist, who was another counsellor, who I thought was very good. And I've seen therapists since. And as I mentioned to you, I'm about to start seeing a therapist again, because I think it's just about time. And I had to sent her an email and was getting it all set up, and then just went, just so you know, I have written a book called My Shit Therapist. So
just in case it crops
up. Heads up.
Yeah.
And she said, okay, maybe that's something we can talk about at our first session. Looking for a therapist in Bristol as well is unique in that, looking for a therapist anyway, I just want to Google image them, and I just want to find the one with the most severe haircut and go, yes, you're the one who's going to sort me out. But then kind of reading about these people in Bristol and reeling off qualifications and years of experience, and you think, yes, this might be the person. And then at the end, invariably they go, and of course I'm a shaman.
I'd be like,
of course I do past life regression. It's like, do you want to do psychedelics? No, I don't. Tom.
That might work for some people, though.
Absolutely,
but,
of course. But it's just
not quite, what you were looking for.
It's not what I'm looking for, and it's just one of the unique challenges of looking for a therapist.
Yeah, well, it sounds like if you were looking at just in Bristol, that you prefer to do it in person, because again, since the pandemic, things have opened up, haven't they? So,
I wanted to have that as an option. I think.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think just one more point, and breaking up with a therapist is really difficult. Well, I personally have struggled with it because I'm a bit of a people pleaser. I don't know. How do you, especially because it is your hard-earned money for the most part, isn't it? It's hard to get it comped on the NHS. It's like,
you're not going to,
if you really need it, you have to be prepared to put your hand in your pocket if you can. And so you're just thinking, oh, this money could have gone elsewhere on something, that's how I've certainly felt. How long have you kind of persevered with somebody that you thought wasn't right for you before you said maybe?
I've been really lucky, actually. I've tended to do it in sort of blocks, and it's always come to its own sort of natural conclusion. But I had a therapist ask me once, like, what do you think I think of you? She was asking me what I imagined she was thinking about me, or how she judged me, or anything like that. And my response was, I've got no idea, and I've got no interest really. My view of it is, I'm paying for a service. I'm not paying you to like me. And she was quite scandalized by that. I think she thought it spoke of a lack of empathy, or maybe a lack of sort of thinking about other people's feelings. But I do think it is, at the end of the day, it is a transaction. It is a business transaction. And if you're not being well served by someone's style of working, or by the work itself, then I think it's absolutely fine to send an email and go, I think that'll be all for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The email route is probably the less scary way of doing it. I've had in my time, I've had some great therapists. I've also had some absolute shockers. One kept trying to like plant seeds. I was like, no, that's not it. Just about like my family. Or she also recommended that I buy, I think it was CBT for dummies. Yeah. Sure,
because what you're doing is paying someone for you to have to do all of that work yourself.
Pretty much, yeah. I think usually when you meet somebody, whether therapist or just in general, you get an intuitive feeling, don't you, relatively quickly.
And it's about getting a sense of what you need rather than what you're comfortable with. So, for example, in the chat that I had with the therapist that I'm seeing next week, I fell into my pattern of trying to make her laugh, and she was having none of it. And I twigged it and went, that makes me feel really uncomfortable, and that means that you're the person that I need to go and see. I think having that sort of awareness of yourself, which is something that only comes with time, I think. You're not paying to make a friend, you're paying someone to give you resources that you can't access on your own.
Yeah.
And I think being really clear about that. And again, this is also, I'm not in crisis. So I have that perspective. I am not going to this woman and going, please fix my life because I'm falling apart.
Yeah.
I'm well enough. I'm in the binary between, and this is another thing, living beyond the binary of illness and wellness, and I think a lot of the conversations about mental health are these sort of hero stories of, I wanted to kill myself, but now I run ultra marathons. And a lot of people don't exist in that space. And those stories are, of course, valid, but most people are sort of in the middle. You're not in crisis, but you're not managing as well as you could be either. And what that does is it makes people go, well, I'm not in crisis, so I'm not going to seek help.
Yeah.
I'm not at rock bottom, so I don't need to seek help.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm in a place where I know that that's not the case. And I know that seeking help now will put me in much better stead in the future. But it also means that I'm paradoxically, it means I'm better, more likely to get the right help for me because I'm able to apply more critical thinking skills to it than please help me or else I'm going to die.
Well, if we go back to Prince Harry's theory of calling it mental fitness, it's like in order to stay fit, you go to the gym, you have a gym membership. So we can kind of go with that thread a little bit with what you're talking about with a therapist. Again, if you've got the funds to do it and if it's working for you. I feel like
also being prepared for the fact that it might not work.
Yeah.
Having that uncertainty.
Yeah. Or like with me, even earlier this week, I messaged mine and said, and she actually picked up on it on our last session. She was like, oh, well, you feel a bit closed off. And I was like, oh, no, I'm good. And I generally meant it. I wasn't masking anything. I was like, no, I'm fine. And then I was chatting to my mum and I said, I just don't really feel like talking about any of the details. Like at the moment, I feel like, So I messaged her and said, look, I think at the moment, like I don't need any more sessions. I don't feel like going there, but I'm sure there will be a time where I'll need to check back in again, because she was really good, but she also, I felt like she served a purpose. But then on top of that, though, and I've come across it a few times where therapists have said, well, it'll take about a year, like this, like the prescribing something. And then there's that, what I think, people have to be a bit mindful of that as well, that's more lining of pockets, I think, and being a regular client. So, yeah, I think that's always like something to be cautious of as well.
Of course. And that's absolutely true. And it's true that the people who are in crisis can't be cautious. So the most desperate people are the ones who are going to go, okay, do you want me to pay for that in advance?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's always worth, there are always new therapies and new things about, CBT coming out every day. I saw when my research, there's like RTT, which is rapid transformational therapy, which seems to be like just a couple of sessions, just to like get straight to the point.
Oh.
And then you come out of it feeling a different way. This is going to get me onto my book about regret. I'm writing a book exploring regret. And I spoke to a professor, a psychotherapist called Professor Wendy Dryden, who does single session regret therapy, where in the single session, as the name suggests, he helps people let go of unhealthy regrets and move past it in a way that changes their behavior and changes their thought processes in the future. So it is possible to have a couple of sessions and find solutions that work for you in the short term. But I think, where do you start researching that? I found out about this year, and I've been looking at, different types of therapy for about 10 years. So it's access to all of the information, I think.
Well, since you've segued us into the next book, can we know when it's going to drop? Shall we start with that?
So hopefully it will drop autumn, winter 25.
Okay.
And it is an exploration of regrets, because I think regret is very underexplored.
I would agree with that, yeah.
And I think people fall into two camps with it. I did the same sort of research project. I held a sign that said, what's your biggest regret? And I took it to Newport in South Wales. And people responded in two ways. They either said, I got loads of regrets, I could fill your book. Or they said, I don't have any regrets at all, I don't believe in them. So I think that there's an interesting space to explore nuanced regrets. And again, collect some lovely stories about regrets, and see why in 2024 it's so underexplored. You can, put hashtag shame or hashtag guilt. All of this stuff comes up on Instagram. There's loads of stuff where people are exploring, lots of different elements of lots of different negative emotions. But regret is the one that isn't explored. And I really want to explore. I want to have a look at that.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to reading that bad boy when that comes out.
Thank you.
I do, if it's cool, I want to squeeze in just a couple of questions about writing, because
of course,
you credit writing as a huge part of your recovery.
Absolutely.
And, it is widely recommended to do things like journaling, and Gabby Bernstein calls it rage on the page, putting rage on the page, just getting it out of you and, onto paper, and then you can burn the paper or whatever, throw it away. So what role do you believe that storytelling plays in destigmatizing mental health issues?
That's such a great question. I think the more we tell our stories of every aspect of mental health, so not just I feel a bit shit, or it's this is what's my housing is affecting my mental health, parenting is affecting my mental health, my relationship with this person is affecting my mental health. I think the more we hear and understand those stories and listen with compassion and with empathy, then we can show that same compassion and empathy to ourselves and to our own mental health. I think it's essential.
I'm thinking about, again, in the book, where you talk about when you couldn't sleep. There was, I don't know how long it was for, but the period between 3:30 and 5:30 in the morning,
Yeah.
you would just write. And I imagine you were writing to express what was going on inside your brain.
Yeah.
Necessarily writing stuff that you were thinking is going to be for public consumption. Correct me if I'm wrong. So
that's absolutely right. I'd love to say, I was up between 3:30 and 5:30, and by the end of the week, I'd written a bestseller. A lot of it was just gobbledygook.
Right.
But when I was ill at that period between 3:30 and 5:30, my brain's favorite thing to do was to imagine all of the terrible things that could happen to the people that I love or to me. And I could either lie there and, for example, imagine, how I would tell my parents that I've got incurable cancer. I don't, but that was just a fun role play that my brain would make up at that time. I could either lie there and live that, or I could get up and write. So I got up and wrote. And
by getting it onto the paper, did it empty it then from your head? Or maybe not completely?
It just created some space between occupying the thoughts and occupying that space and reading it and seeing it in front of me. I think having that little bit of distance, having that little bit of alienation from it, it just tired me out. It just removed it from my brain so that I could go to sleep. And art is so important to any kind of art, really, is so important to take us out of our own brain and to help us get some perspective that isn't just our own, that isn't just the washing machine of our own brain.
Yeah.
I watched Tyrannosaurus when I was very depressed. It's not a great idea. You might as well whack it on a triple bill with Schindler's List and Sophie's Choice. And the DVD extras, Paddy Considine said that it started life as a short film. And I thought, I might be able to write a short film. And I did. It's not very good. It's never going to see the light of day. But it was just another way of occupying my brain, to just kind of shush these thoughts and to give my brain something to do that wasn't plan my own death.
And you prefer to do it like old school, classical way, pen to paper versus
pen and paper? Typing. Yeah, 100%. So every morning I write 3 pages of morning pages, and I'll tell you this as well. And I know that I just said then I do it every morning. I don't do it every morning. I want to do it every morning. But what I've done recently is I've bought a kid's sticker book. And every morning when I've written my pages, I put a sticker on my calendar. And that stupid little dopamine hit that you get has kept me so consistent. Wow. And now my calendar's just full of stickers because I have actually been doing it every day. So even though it's something that I know is good for me and that I know that I enjoy doing, you don't always prioritize that. But that's just a little snippet, a little bit of advice.
So for anybody listening that they might be thinking, well, that's okay for you to say you're obviously a great writer. They
wouldn't think that if they saw my morning pages. It's just the most repetitive, nonsensical bliss. It's unreadable. It's completely unreadable to anyone but me.
Right.
And that's the point. It helps because that's the purpose of it. It's not meant to be writerly. It's just about emptying your brain and getting the contents of your brain on the page so that you can move on to the next thing. A really unpopular analogy would be in Harry Potter when Dumbledore uses the pensieve, when he puts his wand to his head and he can pull out a specific thought or a specific memory. and look at it. I think being able to do that, being able to pull those thoughts out of your brain and look at them and really examine them that's a really helpful thing. I
Mm.
also, it's also really helpful to just write the color of the sky or the color of the leaves or what my cat Caroline is up to, just to fumble through till you get to the third page. So I got this from a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which I absolutely love. And she swears by it, and she says, by the time you've written a page and a half, even if you're just writing, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write, I don't know what to write. By the time you get to a page and a half, you can unlock something, and that's when the insights come. And you might not see them straight away, but when you look back on your pages from 6 weeks or 3 months or 12 months ago, you can see those progresses and you can see the timeline of those thoughts.
Mm. So then being a professional writer, it's your career.
Mm.
Do you not ever wake up and think with it's your morning pages, oh, but I've got to do that for my job. So, because it sounds like it could easily kind of all bleed into just, it's all writing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not that I think I do that for my job, because writing your morning pages or writing in a journal, as I say, if people could see it, they would have no idea that I'm a professional writer. It's a completely different exercise and a completely different beast. The thing that stops me from writing in the morning is the same thing that stops me from going for a run every morning. I just don't prioritize it, even though I know it's the right thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
The insight that I get from it is invaluable, and just the space. So just like setting an alarm for 30 minutes and just know that for 30 minutes, this is all I have to do is invaluable for setting me up for the day.
Wow. I think that's just such great advice to people, just because they might think, well, it's just, I'm not a writer, so therefore it's not for me.
Well, but you're a thinker.
You're right.
You don't have to be a writer. You just have to be a thinker.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about what I worry about with AI and when we were at school, we were told you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket, so you've got to learn how to do maths. Mm-hmm. Now everyone has a calculator in their pocket. This generation of young people are learning to write essays, but thinking, I don't have to know how to write an essay. ChatGPT is going to do that for me, which is true.
Yeah.
But actually, the key thing about writing an essay isn't to turn you into a great writer. The key thing about writing is that it's thinking. It's thinking on the page. It's your cognitive function, and it's working out who you are and what you think and how you feel honestly when you're not lying to yourself and when you're not presenting to other people. Mm. So the exercise of writing, in this case, isn't about writing something for a reader. It's about writing for the thinker, and it's to help you think. And I think when your mental health is poor and your cognition is failing and the thoughts are just awful, you've got, you might have like multiple parallel tracks of thoughts.
Yeah.
Writing is the thing that helps you streamline all of that and just gives you some space from it.
And of course, and it helps you feel as well, doesn't it? It helps you manage and process emotions, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, final question. What is a simple, actionable first step we can take when it comes to writing for our mental health that will help us on our journey to building a happier life?
Invest in a nice notebook. Don't just get the cheapest thing and use the pen that you nicked from IKEA or Argos. It doesn't have to be the most expensive thing. It can be like the third cheapest thing. Make it a treat. Make it something nice for yourself. And this is going to be really tricky for people who have kids, but just ring fence half an hour for yourself in the morning. And all you have to do is finish and lower your expectations. All you have to do is write 3 pages. That's it. If you write, I don't know what to write for 3 pages, that's all you have to do. And be consistent and be easy on yourself, for God's sake.
I love it. On that note, Thank you so much. We've massively run over, so I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. This might even become 2 episodes, Michelle.
I love it.
So My Shit Therapist and Other Mental Health Stories, incredibly relatable read. I think people, if they've not got it yet after hearing you speak, will get your vibe and will enjoy it as much as I did.
Available Thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's available in all the usual places you buy your books from.
All good bookshops and one really, really bad, evil, massive one.
And if people want to find out like what you're up to and all that kind of stuff, then is Instagram the best place?
Instagram's the best place, Miss M. Thomas. MSM Thomas.
Yeah, MSM Thomas. We'll put all that in the show notes as well. Thank you again, Michelle. This has been such a great chat.
Thank you. Cheers, Gabby.
Thanks again to the fab Michelle Thomas. It's Gabby back with you, and thank you to you, my friend, for listening to this very episode of the Happier Life Project podcast. As always, please do stick with me for 1 more minute while I run through the important housekeeping. If you are suffering with your mental health, there is a crisis button on the My Possible Self app, which will signpost you to the correct information for immediate expert advice. Those of you who are listening on one of the podcast platforms, the My Possible Self app is completely free to download, so you don't need to worry about it costing you anything. If you are in crisis or you think you may have an emergency, please do call your doctor or the emergency services immediately. The views expressed in this podcast are solely those of the interviewer, which is me, and the interviewees. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as a substitute for professional or medical advice. Our partners at the Priory Healthcare are not involved in the production or content of this podcast. If you found this episode helpful and you are listening on one of the podcast platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Amazon Music, please do leave a review, especially if it resonates. It helps others to find us and it really does mean a lot. We read every single comment. And to find and follow us on social media, if you're not already there, Instagram is the best place to keep in touch, and we're at My Possible Self, and I've been at Radio Gabby. Do take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.